So I made the switch to playing Age of Sigmar and I'm really enjoying it. And despite the rules being very similar to Warhammer 40k, I just feel like the game feels different in many ways. So my guest and I today are going to explore why that is. My name is Tanya, otherwise known as the War Mistress. I've painted some minis, I've played some games, and I'm on a mission to be nice and roll dice. Welcome back to another episode of Be Nice and Roll Dice, and we're going to talk Age of Sigmar today. So I'm super excited because I've been playing a lot of Age of Sigmar, I've been enjoying it a lot, and I've noticed some things that I can't quite explain. So my guest today is AOS Coach. And Coach, for people who may not know what it is that you do, why don't you take it away and explain that to them?
G'day. Thanks for the invite. So my name is Anthony, aka AOS Coach. I have a YouTube channel. I've been running it for a couple of years now, and really, my channel is all about tactics and advice, and really leveraging the great experience within the community and sharing it across the internet, right? Because the high tide lifts all boats. So. I look at different factions, different types of strategic pieces, maybe something that comes in brand new, and maybe give you some ideas and starters. But ultimately, it's a more of an educational type channel to really help the Age of Sigmar community get good. Really.
I have binge watched a lot of your videos. I've been exclusively playing ogres because they're my spirit animals. Deep down inside, I feel like I am also an ogre because I love to eat stuff and I'm always cold. So I sort of binge watched all of your ogre content and I was like, this is the coolest channel ever. So I'm super excited to have you talk to me about Age of Sigmar today.
No, it's absolutely look. It's a great game. I really enjoyed it, and I have cool guests. I think it's probably one thing that's different about my channel is that I don't try to tell you about every faction and try to share my wisdom. I think it's great to just talk to community members to understand from their experience and their thinking and their knowledge and their playtesting, and kind of fast track your success by getting through their failures. So
Hmm.
thanks for the compliment.
Yeah. And one of the cool things that I really like, and one of the reasons why when people ask me, like, where do I go to learn more about Age of Sigmar, I send them to your channel, is because you will look at all of the units. You will talk about efficiencies, but you will look at all of the units and say maybe they do have a place in your list, right? Like you sort of analyze it, look at what they do, and try to like sort of theorize where they might fit. And I really like that because I find sometimes in 40k content or even just in your local playgroup, sometimes people be like, "Oh, don't take that. That unit is garbage." But I like that you sort of like approach it in a different way. It's like more positive and like maybe more of a um, proactive approach to list building, and I really find that refreshing.
And maybe this is a difference in the Sigma community, or maybe it's just an approach that I have, but I try to be constructive because I realize that models are what draws people to the game. And, there might be something that's really popular in the game. Perfect example is I play Daughters of Cain, which is, the murder stripper, snakes, Marathi, all the wonderful army. And at the moment, the game is really heavily weighted towards the snakes. You got bow snakes, you got combat snakes, but that's not why I got into the faction. I wanted to get into the witch elves. I wanted to get into that murder cult. And I realized that it's not the strongest, but I want to understand what's the best I can do with the toys that I want to run. So, you know, and not everybody wants to run snakes. And I fully appreciate that. So at least that's my approach. It's like I have the awareness to understand I'm not taking the optimal choices, but how do I make the most of what I've got?
Mhm. Mhm. Um, so I really appreciate that, and I really appreciated that when I was learning more about what I wanted to do with my ogre list too, because like man eaters, I love them. They're not very good, but I got some ideas on how I can use them, and basically as a suicide unit, pretty much. And I've had a little bit of success actually using them, but they are pretty big point sinks, so you do have to have a plan. But yeah, I just really liked your approach. It was really refreshing coming out of 40k. Um, but something else that I've noticed about Age of Sigmar, it's not a balanced system, right? Like 40K, it has lots of different factions. It's not going to be perfectly balanced ever. But for some reason, the imbalance feels less crushing when I play Age of Sigmar than when I play Warhammer 40K. And I've sort of thought about it, and I really have no idea why it feels so different. Because I can look at, like, I played against Age of Sigmar, or the Stormcast Dragons on Saturday, and I was like, wow, those are really strong. I can see why the meta loves these. And I actually lost a lot of my sort of heavy hitting damage units right away because this is my first time playing them. I had no idea what they were able to do. And at no point did I feel like I was completely out of the game. But if I had experienced something like that in 40K, I would probably just be like, maybe we should re-rack. Do you know why it feels so different?
Yeah, good question. And first off, I wanted to share a little secret with you. And I know you're an Imperial Guard fan, and I found my
Yes.
old Commissar Yarrick from when I
Look
used to play Guard,
it!
OG Crapman. But
I
I
love
used to
it.
play Guard back in the ye old day. I've still got my Sisters of Battle. I thought it would be my retirement funds, but Game Workshop re-released Sisters of Battle, so I'm. It's not like my Bretonia that can kind of like take me to financial freedom. But you asked a good question. It's a good question. I haven't played 40K in a long time, so you'll need to lead me on the 40K side. But from what I see in most circumstances, Age of Sigmar is very much a scissor paper rock game. And part of that is the fact that we don't have runaway leaders. Yes, we have strong builds. Yes, we have strong factions. But from my observation on 40K, it seems like as the meta evolves, there's always that faction that has like a 70% win rate, and everyone kind of goes into and kind of really spends all their money and their time and they quickly chase that meta. While in Age of Sigmar, first off, we don't have those runaways. We kind of sit between like a 40 to a 60% win rate on average. You never really have that, auto win faction. But there's probably a lot of other things you kind of unpack, whether it's the incentive structure of the players, whether it's maybe the mechanics of how the game kind of works. And I know there's been differences between the stratagem system and the command point system. And just overall, I think the double turn and the priority roll really does change a lot as well because you can't formulate a strategy because 40K it's you go, I go, you go, I go. That priority roll can change the things. If you are too aggressive, then you can be punished if you fail the priority roll. But if you're defensive, you can really take advantage of it. So it keeps games on a knife edge, I find.
Hmm. It's interesting you bring up the priority role right away because when you talk to especially more like competitive Warhammer 40K players, like they are so against the priority rule. It scares them almost, right?
It's the number one. It's the number one reason why you guys won't jump the fence. Like if you ask the 40K community why won't you play Age of Sigmar, I guarantee you majority of the responses would be the priority role in the obviously the game in particular
Hmm.
is the thing that stops them from jumping.
Right. It's funny because in my experience, I've played about 20, probably just over 20 games so far, and I can't think of any one time where I lost the priority and I immediately thought, that's it for me. Like, I don't know if it's just because I'm a defensive player in general. Um, that's what I sort of chalked it up to. But then I was talking to my husband who plays completely different than me. He's just like bull in a china shop, like just gonna go for it. And he feels the same way as I do. Like, he hasn't had a game where like he really felt thought that the priority role like put the nail in the coffin for him. So I'm not really too sure why anymore. When he told me that, I wasn't sure why it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal.
Because smart players will take advantage of the priority role. So, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about here, in 40K, it's obviously you go, I go, you go, I go, or obviously the reverse. But in Age of Sigmar, what we do in between battle rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5, we'll roll the dice, and whoever gets the highest roll gets to determine who goes first and who goes second. And what happens in that mechanic is there is no guarantees. Tanya could be really aggressive with her approach. She plays ogres. You want to be like, let's say, for example, you want to be really aggressive. You're an ogre
Okay.
player. You want to get into melee, so you run up the board. You're being really aggressive because you want to charge. But if you fail that priority roll, then you might have overstretched, made my charges easier to hit you, or maybe you've got more units in shooting ranges. So it really rewards the smart player for being aggressive, being defensive, and a bit of both. And and what I often find is I think it's is it Chris Rock that said, or it might have been Eddie Murphy that said, you can drive with your feet, but it doesn't make it a good idea. It's the same as true. Just because I win the priority roll doesn't mean I should take it. There's plenty of times where I give it away because I've got my buffs on. I got those critical spells that I need to go off. I got some key abilities that last until my next hero phase. So by giving away the priority roll, and if I've got my models on the objective, I'm relatively confident that I can win and I'm doing well in the game. I can give it away. Like I can go for a double turn later on in the game. So it's not as scary as people think. And once you kind of lean into it, you realize it actually creates a fun game. Um, there's plenty of times where I've lost a game on a priority roll. There's also plenty of times where I've won a game off a priority roll. And it's because of that dynamic, a game where it doesn't go very well has that swing. And for me, that keeps the full 5 rounds of the game exciting.
So you say that sometimes you have won or lost a game on that priority roll. Is that in general near the beginning, near the middle, or near the end?
Usually it's towards the middle to the end. So we're
Hmm.
talking, look, some armies, you mentioned dragons as a perfect example, or there are factions, and depending on when you watch this video, the meta will evolve. But sometimes you will want to be aggressive, right? So dragons want to get into your face, turn one. Um, they will build a list that is low drops so they can determine who goes first, who goes second in the first battle round. Then they want to win the priority roll. So then hopefully they do enough damage that by the time you respond, that you don't have as many tools or I've taken away some of your critical scoring abilities or things like that. But those types of situations are very far and few between. Most armies aren't as aggressive. They can't project their power as quickly, and that's why you often see in Sigma as a bit of a skirmish in the middle of the table.
Yeah, it's funny that you say I might be going off the outline a bit here, but it's funny that you say that ogres are really aggressive because in general I find myself more of a defensive player and I like to create like layered attacks and defenses. So I don't find like I super aggressively like go up the table with my army. I generally play like a balanced list that has like a little bit of the Beast Claw Raiders. It's got a little bit of the Dad Bods, and I tend to not just like choose two flanks. Like I more of like a precision striker, and it's been really working for me. But I haven't experienced like competitive play yet. Is competitive play in Age of Sigmar as like meta heavy almost as it is? Like local GTs in my area, you'll be hard pressed to find anything except like a meta list, like a kick your teeth in kind of list. Is it the same, do you find in Age of Sigmar? Kind of in the middle?
Yes and no, and well, yes and no. So I'd be lying if I said that when you go to the tournament or you look at Best Coast pairings and look at who was in the top 10 to 20 of a local tournament, it's traditionally who's doing well in the meta: Lumineth, Stormcast, Zinch. Like you can go through the list, right?
Hmm.
And obviously that meta evolves constantly. But would I say that when I look at the top 10 lists that it's just copy and paste from someone who's done well at a previous event? No, no. You will get shades of that, and I'm talking on the average here. But I think it comes a lot to the incentive structure of Age of Sigmar. Is that people aren't going to tournaments to win or claw the most amount of ITC points. There is very little to no cash prizes available in Sigmar. You might win a start collecting or a trophy. Whoop de do. I'm not going pro. Winning it's not like getting my bodybuilding pro card if I win the LVO. Awesome, good for me. I'm still probably working a second job, whatever it might be. But for most people, the attitude in Sigma probably is a bit more relaxed compared to 40k, and that's not an insult. 40k has an amazing competitive meta, and I would probably say there's a lot of focus. And you just look at the people out there creating content for the 40k world. There's a lot of nuance, but we can't micromanage. I can't go into my units and I get a unit of 5 ogres. I can't micromanage the level that 40k has. You buy units of 5, and 2 in every 5 of them can get a special weapon. And it's that where it's just like, well, it just what is what it is.
Hmm.
Again, there is competitive. There are people that want to do well, but the incentive structure is probably not driving the meta as hard as 40k. So
Okay.
just it's not like a big kumbaya and we all kind of like have fun and we hug and it's not beers and pretzel. Because when Sigma first came out, it was beer and pretzel pitched. It was like, no, we destroyed the old world. There's no points. It's just put models on the table and for most people they just went, nah, that's not for me.
That's
But
when
we
I
got the
started
general
playing
standing.
war games.
Yeah, and it was fun.
It
But
was.
the tournament, like, look, I remember going to my first Sigma tournament, and before there were points, they tried to balance the game with wounds. And I remember running my idiot free people. It was just like humans, right? Gunners and swordsmen, and I got like 60 wounds to play with. Awesome. One of my first opponents was Archaon and 3 Bloodthirsters, very powerful heroes, but it was a balanced game because it was 60 wounds. And I'm like,
Mm,
yeah, nah,
no.
because one wound isn't equal. A 5
Right.
up idiot versus a 2 up save that can like explode my whole army. I'm like, no, we need some better system.
It's interesting because as somebody who used to I would say I was like a balanced player. I can play competitive, I can play narrative, and I like them both equally. So as somebody who is like almost a casual competitive player of 40k and sort of like following the meta a little bit and trying to stay up on it, um, it was really a breath of fresh air coming into Age of Sigmar and seeing people playing like less powerful factions still going out and winning big events. Um, that was really cool to me because I was looking at it and like a Hedonites list did really well, and I was like, man, there's no way a guard list would do that in the meta in 40k. Is that so? As an uneducated person looking at that, that makes it look like player skill means more in Age of Sigmar rather than list building, right? Like in Age of Sigmar feels
Hmm.
like player skill is greater than list building, but then in 40k it feels like list building and player skill are equal, or list building is slightly more important than skill.
Why would you say that 40k has a heavy emphasis on list building? And maybe I can respond to maybe
Yeah.
the way we look at the world.
I think that it has a heavy emphasis on list building because there's an emphasis on like efficiency and squeezing like the most efficiency or like DPS, like damage per second, like out of your list, right? And in general, list building is a lot more complicated in Warhammer 40k. And again, you see the same types of lists winning the events all the time. Um, Whereas you won't see so much like a weird list kind of pop up as often anymore. I think in eighth you might have, but in ninth you really don't see it that often.
I imagine in the world of 40k, and again, this is only my perception. I haven't touched it since like fifth edition,
Mhm.
although I have been reading, getting some inspiration for my Stormcast. I'm not going to play. I'm just getting inspiration. I've probably spent $1 billion on bits from the Black Templar. Um, I've lost so many bits. I, look, I think if I was building to go to a 40k tournament, an ITC tournament, I want to win. I'm imagining I'm looking either at what the meta is and leaning into the meta, or trying to build a counter meta. Like
Mhm.
if Harlequins are doing well, then what shuts down Harlequins, and trying to build a strategy in a faction, and hoping I can get through those tools. And I don't know if Harlequins are doing well or not. I got no idea, but you know what I mean. Like I'm building a counter meta.
Yeah.
But one thing that I noticed in Sigma versus 40k is 40k has a very deep roster. So
Mhm.
you have only a few factions that are very deep. You look at the
Yes.
Space Marines, you look at the Eldar, very deep rosters. But in Sigma, we have a lot of factions, but not very deep rosters. Yes, there's exceptions, Cities of Sigma, Stormcast, Slaves of the Darkness, but most factions, you look at the Auric War Clans and you look at Ironjaws, there might be 14 choices you can make both in heroes and monsters and troops. So you don't get the deep faction. And why that's important is when you go to a tournament, there could be all 20 different factions at the tournament. So it's not like I'm going to go to a tournament and if Lumineth Realm Lords is doing really well in the meta, or Stormcast Dragons, I may not play them. I may actually not play them. So me trying to build a list to kind of counter the meta, I actually might in fact not face them. So there's a lot of within that incentive structure comes a lot of decision making, and ultimately, Age of Sigmar is a movement game. Despite what anyone might tell you, it's not a combat game, it's not a shooting game, it's a movement game. But it's all about the micro decisions you make. It's how well you know your faction, so you make better decisions and you anticipate making better decisions, but how you make your opponent make poor decisions. And third edition Age of Sigmar has done a really good job to build in more mechanics. That means that there's no idle time. And I think it's probably one thing I really enjoyed is that in second edition, so the one that was just last year, if I got double turned, or if Tanya, your turn is taking a while because you're running a horde of Tyranids or a horde of something, lots of Noblars, I could be sitting idle for 20, 30, 40 minutes and I'm playing with my phone, uninteractive. But Sigma now has a whole bunch of things where even if it's not my turn, I can actually interact into the game. I can redeploy and move my models before you go for a charge. If you do charge me, there's like an Overwatch function for everybody. There's a lot of other little things like that. So really, it comes down to the incentive structure. I think is probably if I was going to give you the what's that one single thing, the difference between us.
All right. That makes sense. I also feel like, so what we've been doing in my local sort of area is 40K sort of imploded through like COVID. People just stopped playing, and I don't think people are super confident to come back yet. So my husband and I actually started like a little group to learn Age of Sigmar all together. And we were actually shocked at one, how many people actually wanted to learn how to play in a non competitive sort of environment. And two, how easy people found it to learn this game when they were having so much problems learning Warhammer 40K. We have a bunch of new players who have actually picked it up rather quickly, and I'm not entirely sure. So we were doing a lot of doubles games, and I'm not sure if that helped having people like talk through your decision making process, or if it's something that's built into the game itself to make it easier. Obviously, there's less stratagems and things that you have to learn in Age of Sigmar, and a lot of the stratagems that you use quite regularly are universal, so everybody can use them. But do you think that there's anything else that's making it more like beginner friendly?
I think look, there's probably a lot of things, right? The first one is if we look at the data slate versus a war scroll. If you look at the data slate, and I remember back in the day, your strength and toughness, and you got to work out the initiative orders, and I remember it does take a long time to build confidence, even just in that combat phase. But Sigma, it's like here is the dice roll that you're going for. You need a 3 to hit, a 3 to wound, or a 4 to wound. Um, Rend or AP is -1, and it's really very cut and paste. The abilities aren't overcomplicated. I don't have all these weird detachments where I can build in extra abilities. You mentioned stratagems, and we have universal command abilities: redeploy, rally, all out attack. that are universal to everybody. So I think it comes back to that micro management of your faction and the complication that 40k has, which is a good thing. If I'm a highly skilled player and I want to really tune my faction to the absolute nine, I want to have a couple of things that have plasma pistols or plasma rifles because I need to get through AP of a particular faction that's doing real in the meta. Awesome, I can do that. But in Sigma, it is what it is. And again, it kind of goes back to I just do the best I can with what I've got. I lean into my faction. It's about the decisions that I make, or I go chase the meta. No different to 40k. So I think it's the fact that there's less decisions and people don't want to make a poor decision, especially when you're brand new, right? I get drawn to, I don't know, Black Templars, for example. I love the Black Templar story. I want to paint them black. I want the Maltese cross because I am actually Maltese. And I'm drawn to it, right? But what if they're not doing well? A lot of the community will tell me, oh, don't do that, don't do that. Or I built my models for the first time. I built my Primaris Marines and I put on chain swords because they look awesome. That level of micromanagement isn't in Sigma. And for me to be told by a competitive player that, look, you just need to go buy new models or you need to chase the meta, and it takes a long time to chase and build and paint, and I'm not a fast painter, I can lose my motivation pretty quickly. But as you've already mentioned, in Sigma, it seems like most people can find a way, regardless if you are top, middle, or bottom of the meta, because the swing just isn't as great.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not painting a rosy picture. I'm not saying if you play Gloomspite Gits, you will go 5-0. It will take practice. It will take really good playing. You'll have to work harder for your wins. But if I run Gloomspite Gits, which is probably one of the worst factions right now, it doesn't mean I'm going to auto get the wooden spoon and I can't win a game. I can honestly say that there's no unwinnable games. Everyone has a chance.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I'm not really entirely sure where Ogre Mod Tribes sits in the AOS meta right now. I haven't really been paying too much attention to it, other than like I hear whispers here and there of what's doing well. I don't really hear too many whispers about like what's not doing well, and in general, because I'm just learning, like I played in version 1, but it's completely different now in AOS 3.0. So I'm just sort of learning, and maybe I can't turn that one ear off of the meta, but it's been a really interesting sort of learning experience in my local meta because I've just been putting things in my list and trying them, and I think maybe it's because I watched your videos. I don't really have any judgments too much on like what the units can do. The learning process has been uh really really fun. um but do you have any advice for me as somebody who's just dipping their toes in? I've played a few games, I'm enjoying it. But now, because I have a tournament coming up in June. Do you have any advice for someone like myself who is maybe, my local area is not super competitive, but I am going to step out? What do I need to know going to my first AOS tournament?
Well, congratulations. Well, first off, there's a lot that you need to know, but like nothing overwhelming, right? The, the cool thing about Sigma is the rule of cool. I truly believe that this is why, in my opinion, the community is greater. Warhammer Fest is coming up, and I guarantee you we have the better models than 40k. I'm sorry, but the amazing sculpts for me is just what draws me to Sigma as opposed to the next robot. That's just a personal
I
preference.
do like big stompy robots though.
Look, robots are great. Don't get me wrong. I love the chaos. I love the Chaos Knight when it was released, but there's not much difference between the Imperial Knight and the Chaos Knight, or the next version of the Necrons. But when they bring out something really, fantastical and very fantasy, and I don't know that I'm a fantasy guy, but that's not the question you asked me. You asked me what advice I'd give you. First off, know your army.
Okay.
Sounds basic. Sounds basic. Sounds absolutely basic. But most people, whether you're 40k or Sigma, will will quickly try to chase the meta, and they'll have a game and something didn't quite work, and they go in and try to quickly fix the list. But in my opinion, the list is only like 30%, 40% of your success, probably less, probably 30% of your success. It's about the decisions you make in the game. It's about anticipating the averages of a charge roll. You know, if you have a lot of charges, right? How do I improve my likelihood of making those charges? Because ogres want to fight, or how do I get the consistency in what I want to do? And sometimes it's just us making bad decisions in the moment, and that's where coaching and advice and getting someone who can support you. And why I love tournaments is that if I lose a game at a tournament, I get instant feedback that I can go apply in the next game. You know, well, I tried this, it didn't quite work. I'm going to not do it in this game. And practice, obviously, your local game store, tabletop simulator, um, hunting these people out. There are probably a top 5 factions in every meta as it evolves. And you've had your experience with dragons. Now you've got a better understanding of what would I do again if I face a dragon list.
Hmm.
Maybe I need to have Noblars. Maybe I need to screen out a little bit more. Maybe I need to build a battle regiment and get lower drops in order to determine who goes first, which means I move up the board and take objectives, as opposed to the dragons rushing into my face and pinning me in to my backfield and I can't fight out and it's too late. It's that type of thinking, it's that type of experience that there is no failure, there's only feedback. And when you lose a game, you learn more about your faction. And would I do this again? Do I have the tools to compete? What do I need to do differently? So there are awesome things. You know, our community is great, whether it's a Facebook or a Discord server like AOS Coach, whatever it might be. I find that a lot of people are very constructive to give you a hand.
Hmm.
Um,
Your Discord is amazing, by the way. The people there are
Thank you.
super helpful and super friendly. And if you have any questions about like rules or list building or anything, there's always somebody in there who is like non-judgmentally ready to help you. And I really, really appreciate that in my learning process. So okay,
I,
so I've been doing something good then because I've made a list and I've committed to the list for June already, and I've just been playing the same list like over and over and over and over and over again. Just like really learning, like there's still things that I'm forgetting about the list, so I'm really working on like making notes. So I have little cue cards for every unit, and when I forget something, I make a note on the card so that I don't forget it next time. And um, yeah, I'm just really sort of enjoying playing the same list into other things. So,
I think once you learn your faction, and I imagine this is true for 40k as well, but once I know my profile, once I know my abilities, my stratagems, you know, what my army wants to do, it allows you to take like that elevator look at your faction and go, right, well, how do I make better decisions, or how do I force my opponent to make tough decisions? But until if you chop and change your list too often, you'll find that you're always thinking about your data sheet or your war scroll. You're always thinking about, oh, what's my hit profile, what command ability. You know where you want to allocate your resources and what happens if you go first or you go second. There's been plenty of times where I'll practice to say, well, I'm going to lose one of my key pieces because I want to see if there are, I don't know, Lumineth Sentinels or Stormcast long strikes, which are very long range threats of killing certain heroes. What happens if I lose that hero in the first turn to a long strike? How would I respond? What would I do? And that's all what you're trying to do as you lead to a tournament. You're trying to get experience and knowledge so that you make better decisions at the tournament because you failed at your FLGS. You
hmm
didn't do as well.
yeah. So in that game against the dragons, in general, when I'm playing in my local area because people aren't too competitive, I normally only bring one Frostlord on Stonehorn. That's it, and then everything else is just sort of like one of this, one of that. And I bring like a pretty smashy tyrant as well. And first turn, I lost both of those, and I was like, "Ooh, those are like my main damage dealers in this list." And I even told my opponent because she just brought the dragons because she thought they looked really cool and she had them painted and they were beautiful, and she felt really bad. for, and I was like, "No, no, this is a good learning experience for me. I want to see how many points I can get now." With my two of my only damage dealers gone. I want to see how many points I can get through positioning, and I want to see if there's any chance for me to deny you points as well. And I did end up losing that game, which I had expected. But it was 20 to 30, and I felt like as a new player who had lost all of my damage dealers, I was like, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. And I learned a lot about those dragons, and I won't make those same mistakes again.
I don't know if this is a part of the 40k community, so you'll have to guide me here.
Hmm.
But one thing that I really appreciate with Sigma, from my entire career in Sigma, is that when you lost that game to that dragon player,
Hmm.
you I would guarantee you could have turned around and said, "Hey, what could I have done differently in order to win the game? Or where did I lose the game? Or what could I have done differently?" And I find most people, because Age of Sigmar is a chilled community, we lost our community when the end times destroyed our whole army, right? And in that process of going from Warhammer Fantasy Battles to Age of Sigmar, some people didn't continue with us and they went to Kings of War, Ninth Age, whatever it might be. But when we had a fractured community and we all kind of come back together, I found that this new community that we created is quite welcoming, quite supportive. The one that you're talking about with Discord, it's not specifically unique to my Discord. I think the overall attitude of Sigma players are more relaxed, where we are friendly, we are willing to help because we were through that tough time where no one wanted to play the game. Everyone was laughing at us. So we want to help people as much as possible. And I know when I said, if I lost a game and I said, what could I have done differently? I'm confident most people would give me honest and helpful advice. So I learn from my mistakes the next time. And they might not be right. They don't know my faction, but they go, oh, maybe you shouldn't have charged here, or hey, you should have considered where I was going to, deep strike here, or you left that back objective. And, oh, okay, cool. I learned something new. And I
Hmm.
just generally find the Sigma community, certainly, at least from my experience, they are willing to help because they want you to stay, they want you to grow. And again, it comes back to the incentive structure. Maybe in 40k I want to hold that information because you could be my next competitor for that top elder. I don't know.
I feel like in 40k, if you ask people, a lot of the times they would definitely sort of give you like a bullet point list of like, well, maybe I wouldn't have
That's
done this, or maybe I would have done that. I've never really had an experience where somebody, that's not true. I have had two experiences where people wouldn't tell me, but those were not at tournaments. Those were at the local game store. So, but in out of hundreds of games that I've played, I think in almost every case, they would sit down and like sort of coach you through like knowing their army what might have worked. Um, yeah, I can't say if there'd be any difference. I have to go to my
cool.
first tournament and see what the feeling is. But I usually when I'm at tournaments, I do ask like, hey, what do you think I could have done better? Or I'll sit down and be like, oh, that's what I did. That was a big mistake. And then they'll sort of riff off that and give me
Well,
a
that's good. That's good to hear because I do hear that the 40k community is a bit more ruthless. At least the people who cross the fence and come over to play with us, they talk a lot about people withholding information. And when I rock up
mm,
to a tournament, and maybe when I deploy, I can have a really good 5 minute conversation, and they'll explain to me what their faction does. And I will say to them, they won't tell me the combinations and the synergies, but I'll say, "What's your threat range? Can you deep strike teleport? Can you do X? Can you do Y?" And people are relatively forthright with their information. Maybe because our information was always free on the app as opposed to locked in a codex. And people were very forthright with their information. Where, at least from my what I've heard from again people who cross the fence, there's probably more like gotcha moments because people aren't as forthright. But that's just
mhm.
that's just what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
I think the gotcha moments, I'm not sure that they are like a thing that a person's like, oh ho ho, I'm not going to tell them about this. I think it's just because there are so many ways to break the rules, right? You've got
Mm.
stratagems that break the rules for your army. You've got unit abilities that break the rules. You've got warlord traits that break the rules. And there's just like so many rules interactions that sometimes if you just ask like, do you have anything that can advance and charge? Sometimes that's a 5 minute conversation just in itself. So at a certain point, you have to just be like, you have to like identify what is the key things that would really hurt your army. So, like in my case, playing guard, do you have anything that can pregame move or advance and charge or move over my screens? Those are like the main things because I don't want you to touch my firing base, right? So you kind of have to like pick the things you're going to ask and get to it because you've only got like, 2 and a bit hours to play your game. You don't want to spend half an hour of that going through all of the rules interactions that are going to like affect it. I think that's where the gotcha moments come from.
And intent is obviously a very important part of this, right? Because you're right, we could be talking till the cows come home about our factions and our synergies and what it works. And I think part of it, what you just said, is 100% right. It's the types of questions that we ask better questions. I just don't rock up to the table and say, "Tell me about your army."
Oh,
And then your opponent's just like, well, what do you know? Have you ever played this faction before? And what do but having deliberate questions
yeah.
like whether it's movement or how many wizards or psychers do you have, and do you get any bonuses to cast? Can you came from deep strike? Can you summon? Can you do X? What does your faction terrain do? Having very specific and deliberate questions will get you better answers. And maybe because we don't have as much complication and rule breaking as 40k has. That maybe that goes back to one of your original questions: is why is it an easier game to pick up? Was because originally it was designed with 4 pages of rules, and it was designed to be a more simpler game. And simple doesn't mean that it's an easy game. It just means that maybe it's less to remember, and it's more about, again, what I said about the micro decisions you make throughout those 3 hours of gaming.
hmm It's interesting that we talk about it being like a little bit more simple because I do find that this game is very tactically robust. I keep saying that the reason I'm really enjoying it is because I spend less time studying and more time actually playing the game. And I think when you tell 40k players like, "Oh, Age of Sigmar is a lot more simple to play," I think maybe some of them think it's not as tactical or it's not like you can get pretty sweaty with this game. I think if you really wanted to, like the way that the GT pack missions are, they're very compelling. They are very I don't know, they're just more they're more interesting than the 40k competitive missions, honestly. Um, so yeah, I don't know. What would you say to people who think that Age of Sigmar is maybe too simple?
It's it depends on what you're looking for, right? Um, I enjoy the simplicity because again, I mentioned simple isn't bad. I remember when I used to play. I started my Warhammer journey in third edition, and I'm an Empire man. I love my Empire. I think you have Val recently talking about his journey into fantasy battles, and I remember the big red book, the sixth edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles book. It became a point of who remembers the rules the most. And I don't want to play Warhammer to remember rules. I don't want to study. I don't want to be spending hours and hours and hours looking at books. I want to play, I want to paint, I want to convert, and I want to talk. And part of the simplicity for me is I can go to a table and can have a conversation with my opponent, and because I'm not trying to remember every little combination and every little synergy and timings of sequences and the complexities that maybe 40k creates, it allows me to have a more enjoyable game. It allows me to be maybe let my guard down a little bit. Yeah, I get competitive. Yeah, I get salty. Yeah, I can I can have a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, it's a hobby. It's a hobby. It's not a job. I'm going there to have fun. I want to be nice and roll dice, and I want to meet 5 really cool people. I want to tell stories, and that's what Warhammer is.
Hmm.
And yeah, people want to win tournaments. Yeah, I want to win. I want to, but ultimately, more people at Sigma just want to win more than they lose.
Yeah,
And I'm
that's
talking from the
always been
average
my
player.
goal.
I'm talking the average player here. Yes, you get super competitive people. Yes, you get the painters. Yes, you get the converters and the display board people. But on average, most people just want to play with their wall dollies for 2 days. That's really it.
Yeah.
On
When
average.
some competitive 40k players like, "Oh, it's so simple," and I always say, "Well, chess, the rules are very simple." they really don't get too much more simple than that. And look at how tactically robust it is. And that's like the same feeling that I get. It's easier for me to like take all the numbers and stuff out of my brain and just like look at the board state. Okay, what do I want to accomplish this turn? Like, I'm not thinking about, okay, I have to remember like to get this buff from this character onto this unit, and then I have to make sure that I move them in such a way that I can get that off. And like, I don't know, it's just it feels it feels like I'm learning more by studying less. Um
You you've just nailed it, right? You've absolutely nailed it. I couldn't have said it better myself. I was going to talk about chess when it came to balance, right? If you want to play a balanced game, play chess. But you've nailed it. When I play chess or anyone plays chess, we have the same amount of tools, we have the same amount of models, and it's about the micro decisions. And if you watch any interview with a world champion chess player, and this is what I love about Sigma, when you watch an interview with a world chess player, they won't say that they had this strategy, right? I was going to move this bishop, then I was going to move the rook, then I was going to do this, and I do this. And that's how I win. It's about analyzing every single decision that you make and then how you respond. And then when my opponent responds, I step back and I go, how do I make the most of this situation? Because if you get too far ahead of yourself, then you're going to find that your plan isn't executed. And maybe that's part of Sigma. Maybe Sigma is more about the micro decisions that I keep talking about, as opposed to list building. I have a plan and a strategy. I'm going to throw these stratagems in turn one. I'm going to do this, and it's about executing a sequence.
I would
And I
agree.
don't know. I think stratagems have changed a little bit between eighth and ninth or seventh to eighth, but and it seems less like that. I know there was a lot of people who just give up in turn one because you executed X amount of stratagems and you couldn't come back. But
Yeah, I do feel like there is there is definitely something there, because like when you're playing 40K, you have to almost think like two turns in advance, right? Whereas because of the existence oh, I know, because
no,
of the existence of the priority roll in Age of Sigmar, you can't do that because you don't know what's like who's going to win the priority. You don't know if you're going to be like attacker or defender next turn. Like you have to be more flexible almost in your decision making. You have to be flexible obviously in 40K too, because like depending on what your opponent does or if the dice go sour on you or whatever, like you have to be flexible, but you are definitely building your list to do certain things at least in like turns 1, 2, and 3.
and that's still true of Sigma. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. Again, you mentioned the dragons. You talk about Lumineth Sentinels. You talk about any like Marathi going for the bow snakes and double tapping, and like there are things that you want to build as a sequence. But I wouldn't say that we are sequence heavy. A perfect example in third edition is there's a command ability. It's my favorite command ability called Redeploy. And what it allows you to do is in my enemy's movement
Oh,
phase,
it's so
if you
good.
end if you end within a certain distance, I can I can roll a dice and I move that many inches. I can move forward, I can move back and make your charge harder. I've done plenty of times where an opponent has gotten close to me and I've redeployed a unit onto an objective and then scored an objective or denied my opponent an objective that they wouldn't have normally scored. I could move them forward. And there's so much little tactical nuance. And if I'm building a plan from here, I'm going to do this, and it's interrupted by a redeploy, or I do a rally and I can bring back some models into the unit on a roll of a six, then all of a sudden my plan changes very quickly because of a decision that was made through the game. And I think that's where the interactivity of Sigma has certainly been dialed up in third edition. And executing a plan was probably second edition was probably a bit more, but third edition, it's dynamic. It's just on the go. There's decisions being made constantly, and I really enjoy that. So I'm not
I
sitting idle. I'm not playing with my phone. I'm not on social media. I'm in the game for the whole 3 hours.
I actually really, really love that there's reactionary things that you can do in your opponent's phase as well. I think maybe that adds to the feeling like I never feel like helpless or hopeless even when I'm on the back foot because I know that as long as I've got a command point or two that there's things that I can do to help myself play the mission, whereas I feel like in 40K you're sitting there and you're just removing your models off the board and you're like, there's nothing I can really do about this right now. And I really love that reactionary sort of aspect. And also, that redeploy is so powerful. Like, people who, like, nobody uses it in my local sort of area. And I know, I know. And I lost my general in the first turn in my last game. So the entire time I'm like, man, I wish I had more command points right now. This would be this would be great. But when you have those command points, that is something that you can use in like every turn to like win games, in my opinion. Yeah. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, it's a dynamic game. It's an enjoyable game. I know people who go from Sigmar to 40K and they love the game. I know people who go from 40K to Sigmar and they love the game. There is a lot of commonality between the two games. I think Sigmar is a testing ground for 40K.
I would agree.
I think there's a lot of things that we do that if it works, they'll bring over. And I'm still surprised they haven't brought in endless spells.
Mhm.
That is something like I thought Psychic Awakening would be a perfect way to bring in psychic models on the table of the Maelstroms and things and represent them with your psychers because that's really cool. Like being able to throw fireballs and various spells physically manifested on the table is something that I really enjoyed because I got into Warhammer because of dragons and giants and wizards and skeletons and that type of bring it to the table brings it makes it very real.
Mhm.
We got terrain rules. Our faction bring
Yes.
terrain, and I think 40K has a better terrain system overall.
Yeah. I
But
would agree.
yeah, I think we could definitely borrow from 40K. You've got you between eighth and ninth, you've really improved
Yes.
your terrain
Yeah.
rules. But
Yeah.
even just like allegiance stuff and yeah. So I think we got a testing ground, and you'll be surprised. Like yes, we do our wizard stuff in the hero phase while you do psychic stuff after movement. And yeah, there's some minor differences between the two, but you'd be surprised there is more in common than you probably realize.
I should do another video actually about like the common things between 40K and AOS because there is a
Oh,
lot. And if you play 40K even just like casually, actually the transition over to Age of Sigmar is very quick because like the movement phase works fairly similar, like shooting and combat works fairly, it works similarly enough that you'll pick it up really fast. Um so yeah, I just love this game.
I,
But
I was I was writing scripts for to try to entice your players over to me.
oh really?
I won't like yeah I had a couple of videos. I'm still kind of nutting out, but like please do it. Like the more opportunities because I think when I looked at the factions and how I remember a perfect example. Kharadron overlords, people would describe as the Dark Eldar, and then they kind of changed their playstyle a little bit and became more of a Tau kind of army and you find those commonalities as well. Like you like the hordes, well, there's Skaven and there's Gloomspite Gits if you're a Tyrannid player or Imperial Guard player, or if you want a very powerful type of like whatever it might be. Whether you want to be a combat or a shooting or a fast moving army or a psychic army, there is an equivalent, and I think again when you strip it back, again there's more in common than people realize.
Do you have any other tips for me for game day?
Number one tip that I haven't already talked about is, and I've heard the 40K community complain about this. They're like, "Oh man, why don't we have an equivalent of this?" There's a website called AOS Reminders.
Yes.
It's free. You can pay money and it's some a couple of dollars and you get some really cool benefits. But what AOS Reminders does is it will compile your faction all of its rules by the turn sequence. So all of your hero stuff, all of your movement stuff. If there is something that happens at the start of the movement versus the end of the movement, it will order it in that way. And as a new player, it's a wonderful guide. So you're not going through multiple books, you're not kind of playing with your phone, it's kind of in a sequence. As an experienced player who might just maybe need a prompt to make sure that I cast this particular spell or I do this certain thing, it could be a cheat sheet.
Hmm.
Again, I can't, whether how much you use of it is irrelevant. It's a fact that it's a great way to learn the game, and you spend more time in the decisions on the table as opposed to flicking through books, looking at war scrolls, trying to understand what to do, because that takes you out of the game.
Yeah.
That's probably the number one tip I would give. In addition to practice, get involved, learn. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. Don't worry about your loss. Ask for advice.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited. I've heard, so first off, this is a charity event, so I had to get a ticket because I'm an absolute sucker for anything that's charity. So I'm going to report back in June after this. I'm actually going to do a vlog for the first time in my life. I'm going to do a vlog so people can like watch and see how my day goes. Um, but the last question I have for you, if there are any Warhammer 40K players who are kind of like sitting on the fence or maybe just like peering over the fence, looking in on the Age of Sigmar side going, that looks kind of cool. How would you entice them over to your side of the fence?
I don't think I need to. If I
We have better
what I
models.
Well, look, I can't remember if I was listening to you or I was listening to Frontline Gaming. I remember someone was talking about maybe it was LVO or Adepticon, and they were talking about playing in the 40K community, and then they could hear the Sigma room chanting and cheering and warring, and people just generally having a good time.
Mhm.
Um, Again, I can't speak on 40K. I haven't played at a tournament, but I recently just ran a grand tournament. I ran a 100 player type event, and I had men, I had women, I had children getting involved. I had people who were painting enthusiasts. I had people there wanting to win the tournament and win the prizes. I had people who just wanted to have fun and roll dice. I think the community overall is an enticing one. It's a friendly one. It's one that you can play with the models that you want to play with and whatever drew you to the hobby, and you won't be shamed for it. You want to play your corn blue? Cool. Probably one thing that's probably important to, and I think this is where the legacy of 40K can sometimes be a barrier to entry. I don't want to use the word gatekeeping, but it can be a barrier to entry because Ultramarines are blue, Blood Angels are red. We all know what a Space Marine looks like. But how many people know the color of Hallowed Knights or the Hammers of Sigmar? You want to paint the Mortal Realms, the lore is so open right now. There's a way for you to tell your story, whether it's female dwarves, whether it's a giant that is frosty, whatever you want to do, just do it. I don't think
Mm,
anyone cares.
Night Haunt that are red.
Cool. They're made of blood. They're made of like they're all from the realm of Shimon, and it's taping into the lavary, metallic-y type of. I don't know. I don't care. I'm not going to tell you that you should paint them, nylon oxide, and you've got to paint a certain way. And I think it's that type of acceptance that makes it an enticing one. If you are a top 40K player and you think that we're simple, come to our fence. Show us how good you are. Show us that you are a better player than and prove it. Prove it that your skills are as good, better than the Sigma ones. But on the flip side, if you're a hobbyist, you just want to have fun, you just want to play a game, you want to roll some dice and be nice. We're here and we'd love to have you.
Aw, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. I had a lot of fun. And why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you if they want to know more?
If you want to know more, I have a YouTube channel. It's AOS Coach. We have plenty of videos, live streams, tactical videos I release. I'm one of the privileged few that gets Games Workshop to send me things in advance. So I try to kind of share with you as well what to consider. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's about how you want to use that information. As you mentioned, there is no right or wrong. You do you. Otherwise, I've got a Discord server, and you can see me around in Australia. And hopefully, if you attend the LVO, I'm going to grab a ticket to the Las Vegas Open 2023. And
I would love to
Um,
go. I have trouble getting to events that are far away because I have to travel by myself. Yeah, I would love to go though. Maybe I'll
you
find
know,
a.
it's like a
Hmm?
you know, it's like a 20-hour trip for me. It's like 20 hours to fly from Australia to the LVO. Surely you can travel. And you can
It's
find some buddies.
I wish, but like every time I go to find like buddies, it's always like something happens, or oh, I'm staying with the Art of War people, or oh, I'm staying with like this group of podcasters. And something always comes up that I just can't seem to make it work. But maybe LVO is the one where I just save all my pennies and I just do it.
I actually don't like traveling with people mostly because there's times like, especially with a tournament, you just want to like just decompress. Like I don't want to be on all the time. And when you're at a tournament, you're constantly on. I just need a place that I can just chill out. So
Yeah.
I'm sure if your people are going into LVO, you'll pop it in the comment section now. You've already liked the video because this has been a wonderful discussion, and you've also left a comment. Tell Tanya that you're going to go to the LVO. Tell
Look at
people,
this
like I said,
professional over here.
no, but like you just got to send the signals out. You're like, let's go have dinner, and like your crew comes with you, and you meet new people, and I think that's Warhammer. Warhammer. If I share one thing, whether you're 40k or Sigma, if you haven't gone to a tournament yet, it's not about making you cry and your opponent drinking your tears.
No.
It's a it's about meeting people. It's about getting new experiences. Maybe there are no I don't know. I was going to try to be 40k. I don't know. Maybe there's no Imperial Guard people in your community, but you get to meet new people in Imperial Guard. You get some experiences, and then after that tournament, you have new friends, you have new people, and the more tournaments you go to, that person you saw last month or a couple of months ago, you build a relationship over time. So it's not as scary as it seems, whether you're playing Sigmar, 40k, Blood Bowl, Necromunda, or whatever it might be.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I actually really do enjoy going to events. So that's why I'm so excited for this one in June. It's actually the first time that I am traveling alone, so it'll be like a little bit of a like test drive to see how it goes. But I have family in the area, so that's
Can, one thing that works really for me, and I tell people in my community, is if this is your first tournament or if you're brand new to the scene, message the TO,
mhm.
message the tournament organizer and say, hey, this is the first time I've ever gone to Sigma, or this is the first time I've been to this community. And you'll find people will put out the signal. They'll say, hey, like for example, my tournament that I ran 2 weeks ago, we did a breakfast in the morning. So if people want to come over and just
Oh.
hang out and meet people, or have name badges, and often I'll put like someone's name and then like their Instagram or their Twitter. So when we're at the gaming table and I want to take a photo of us, I can actually share it on Twitter or Instagram, and I've got your handle. And again, it's all these little things. Or if you are traveling, they might go, oh, did you know these types of people? Or hey, you should speak to this person. You might get a carpool because as a TO, I know that you're from Toronto and or wherever you are in your land, and they can introduce you to people from that community. So um, be proactive.
All right. And I will do that. I have actually already messaged the TO for this thing in June because I believe in doing that. Also, I have some Noblars that I 3D printed and I just think they're cute, so I wanted to get them okayed first. So,
I
oh.
mean, they're no Gloomspite gits. I'm not trying to shame you or anything, but I am a gits man. I love my mushroom eaters, and I don't eat anyone else that's not a Gloomspite git.
That's fair. All right. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, maybe we should get back together and do like the same sames of Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k. That could be fun.
Cool. Well, maybe there's an introduction to my channel, and maybe you can share with us your first tournament experience.
I would love
I,
to.
I think there's a lot of people that would love to hear from you because there is that fear of win at all cost players at tournaments, and it's not really there. It's really not there.
No,
It's not really a fear that you should worry about.
I would agree with that. But yeah, I'm super excited. Let's do it. And until next time, everybody, be nice and roll dice. So what do you think? Does Age of Sigmar just feel a lot different than Warhammer 40k to you? Tell me all about it in the comments down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you get notifications whenever I go live or release a new video. Do you like what I do? Consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is down below. It also unlocks my exclusive community Discord. Do you want more hobby content? Follow me on Instagram for daily updates and listen to Forge the Narrative podcast, in which I am a co-host with new episodes out every Saturday. And until next time, everybody, be nice and roll